Bill Alcoholic. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say either. My sobriety date is March the 27th, 1985. And for that, I am truly astonished. Dave started talking about changing the big book. That's all I can think about now. And if you ever had the experience of being involved in general service, you'll understand that that's impossible. The big book will never change. Because as soon as you get into a position that you actually know what you're doing, they move you. For fear that you might affect some change. Probably one of the more brilliant structures of Mr. Wilson. And get into general service, it'll drive you nuts. It's just amazing. And you can't drink for years because it takes, once you get in there, they won't let you out, until you really want to try to do something, and then they eliminate you. And it just drives you nuts. There's a real, you hear a lot of people in AA, some speakers, that talk about how we've lost our edge, that we've lost something, that the message has been diluted, and we should go back to the basics and back to the way it originally was. It's like Clarence Snyder used to do. You couldn't go to a meeting for about 3 months. He'd beat you to death with 5 or 10 guys every day, make you work the steps, and then he'd let you come to the meeting for fear that you might dilute their statistics of success rate. So they weed them out before he ever got to the meeting. Should we go back to that? Some of us think that's a pretty good idea. The AA shouldn't work because the first rule of Alcoholics Anonymous is that everyone gets to come. Everyone. And you and I both know there's some people that should be weeded out of this thing. It just shouldn't work. I mean, the drug addicts have been ruining Alcoholics Anonymous since 1935. It's going to, and you can see them in the back of the room, all the tweakers and the crackheads and stuff. Raise your hands. See, they're hiding out in AA. So we're getting diluted. A few years ago in Tehran, Iran, there was a convention. Now, in Tehran, Iran is a Muslim country, so you can't have AA because there's no alcohol. Therefore, there's no alcoholism. But you can have NA because drugs are illegal, but evidently they're not that immoral. So you can have NA. So they had an NA convention in Tehran. 12,000 people showed up. 12,000. The only event in the U.S. that's that big is Founders Day. 12,000 people at an NA convention. Now, do you suppose there's some alcoholics hiding out in the NA meetings? Destroying from within? You just know there's winos there that are just ruining the program, There's three, how we handle singleness of purpose is that we give you a big book and we'll give you the steps and we'll help you struck whatever your weird little fringe group is, when they came up with Codependence Anonymous, they came up with an organization that absolutely every living human being qualifies for, So everybody can work the steps now. And we help you start your own group. There's 300 12-step groups now. 300. There's a group for every fringe, weird nutcase you can imagine. It's just, that's how we handle singleness of purpose. And I think if you want to look at the growth of Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to consider that. Look what spun off from us. Everybody wants to be us. They all want to be us, I think we're thriving just well. The other thing that these people, these naysayers say is that there's 2 million members, and it was growing. And we used to have an 875% success rate. Now it's negative 472. And, you know, however you take the statistics that you don't understand and twist them to meet how you feel about your local group is what they come up with, you know. And if you get involved in the statistics, I have a little website, and you can download this thing. It explains it in detail, how they write it. The first thing you realize when you're halfway through trying to understand it is they have no idea how many people are in AA. They have no idea how many meetings there are. They have no idea. They say there's 150,000 meetings. There's probably 300,000. They don't count the ones that aren't registered. How many meetings might you go to that aren't registered with New York? None of those get counted. They don't count single meetings. They only count groups. In California, where I'm from, where AA started, specifically Southern California, you know, the epicenter of sobriety. You know. There aren't many groups. There's only individual meetings. Probably 20% of the population of Alcoholics Anonymous is in California. Probably. Maybe. Who knows? Who the hell knows? There's millions of us out there, though. The meetings are overflowing. You all send your kids out there after you hang them up in trees in Idaho and beat them with birch twigs for a while and send them to recovery places, and they all dump them in our meetings, and we have to sponsor the little bastards. That's where all the tweakers are coming from. You know? There could be 3 million people, 4 million people, 5 million people in AA. Who knows? But I'm here to report to you, my opinion is, and it's a really good one, is that Alcoholics Anonymous is alive and well and as vibrant and effective as it has ever been. I think it's better than it's ever been. I really do. I really believe that. If you're in an AA community and there's a strong ethic of sponsorship and step work, the meetings that you go to are going to reflect that. People aren't going to use the meetings as their sponsor because they have a real one. And they're actually working the steps. And that's what people will talk about in meetings because that's what's going on in their lives. You know, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, people want to structure the meetings and have it so rigid and tight so that the message is carried. And my belief is the message isn't carried in the meetings. It's carried when you and I sit across my kitchen table from each other and we're reading the book together and working the steps together. That's AA. The meetings are for where we meet each other. It's where we find each other. And the meetings are anarchy because everybody gets to come. And I think I know what you need when you go into a meeting. I know exactly how the meeting should be run. I know exactly. And I'm convinced that I'm full of shit. I'm convinced of it. I have no idea what you need when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe you need to walk into a meeting where people are sharing about how their day went so that you feel comfortable and relaxed and nobody's aggressively approaching you and it's just like nice. Maybe that's what you need. And after some time, you'll look for something deeper, something more, and you'll go find it. How do I know that isn't? That is not what I needed when I got to AA. You know, I needed somebody to sit me down and tell me to shut up and listen, and I was ready. You know, but all those are just my opinions, and they're really good ones. You know, well thought out, rehearsed. You know. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a zealot. I bought the whole thing. The most fun about coming to these conferences, especially the structure of this particular conference, the ones that are popping up all around, is I get to listen to what other people feel about Alcoholics Anonymous. The most fun I have is sitting around a dinner table with some of these men and ladies and talking about AA and how we feel about it and what we think about it, you know, and how things should be done. I love that. I revel in it. I think about it. It's the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. It has given me a forum to express myself. You know, it's given me relationships that I never thought I'd have. And it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. I was a surfer and a biker and a tough guy. I never went to the beach. My motorcycle rarely ran. and I was afraid to fight. But I looked really good. I had a chrome Nazi helmet for a hat, and primary chain for a belt, and black greasy Levi's and big black boots with chains around them. I've got tattoos all over me, but I had a clip-on earring because I didn't want to hurt myself. My biker nickname was Horny. I have it tattooed on my arm right here, and it's misspelled. It's Horney. Horny. Well, what can I say, you know? There's my story. The other thing I love about these conferences is they give you a topic to share about, because I get tired of hearing my story, you know. I mean, what happens with speakers, I'll tell you what happens, is we start making stuff up. And it isn't for you. It isn't for you. It's just to keep our own interest, you know. So really it isn't a lie. It's just kind of a fabrication, you know. It's, you know, and I've been in a mental institution. I was in a mental institution twice. My wife was listening to me talk one time, and I said, I've been to the mental institution a few times. And she's in the car with me, and she goes, weren't you in the mental institution twice? I go, yeah, you know that. She goes, why did you say a few times? That's more than two. And I told her to shut up. Yeah. Now, tell me this. Where else would you enhance your number of times in a mental institution? Make me more of a superstar than I already am, you know? My dad got sober in March of 1954. When he died in 99, he was 45 years sober. My mother died in 2002. She was 48 years in Al-Anon. And she helped found the Al-Anon Central Office of the Intergroup in L.A. And we hung out with Chuck Chamberlain and all the boys. And they sent me to go talk to Chuck when I was 17, trying to straighten me out. My vivid memory of that was sitting next to him in his chair, overlooking the window in Laguna Beach, thinking to myself, what is this old guy talking about? You know? And I grew up in a house that was part of what was going on in California, where they were building the Alcoholics Anonymous that we now enjoy on the west coast of the United States. My parents were really active, really involved. You know, and I grew up in a house where there would be spontaneous barbecues would just break out. You know, people would show up. I'd come home from school and there'd be a guy laying on the back porch waiting for his sponsor to come home. You know, one day I came home and there was a woman hiding in the garage. That was the Al-Anon. Don't make Al-Anon jokes if you don't know what it is. A lot of people make a lot of stupid Al-Anon jokes because they don't know what it is. But if you know what it is, you can make some great Al-Anon jokes. You know? I stop and think of the consciousness of an individual that would live with us on purpose. What are they thinking? You know, it's like, oh dear. By the time I was 17, I was a bad drunk in high school. I was carrying a gun, and I had the big jacket and the slouch and the sneer and a bad attitude. You know, and I grew up in a pretty nice home. I have no idea where I had rage. They sent me to my first shrink when I was 13 because I was just pissed off at the injustice of it all, I guess. Who knows? You know, where does that come from? Who cares where it comes from? I don't care anymore. And but I love the process of finding out because it's all about me. You know, that's the problem with psychotherapy. Psychotherapy can kill alcoholics. You know, the cure for alcoholism and all that surrounds it is me getting out of myself, being relieved of the bondage of self. And the whole focus of psychotherapy is for me to get into myself and find... You got to be careful. That's the problem with alcoholics going to Al-Anon. Because Al-Anon's the same thing. It's about getting out of other people's business and into yourself where you have some control. An alcoholic could go there and die. Just literally implode on himself. You got to be careful. You got to be sober long enough, healthy enough to be able to go to Al-Anon. I'm not saying don't go. I'm just saying be careful. Leave breadcrumbs so that you know. My dad used to tell me, he says, stay out of Al-Anon, man. He says, don't suck the air out of the room. He says, if you're going to go, don't share. Just listen to them, But at 17, there was no talking to me. I was in trouble. And at 22, I was in the Oregon State Mental Institution. One of those few times I was in the mental institution. And I was running with an outlaw motorcycle gang, and I was sticking needles in my arm every day and drinking like a fish. And I had gotten married, and I had 2 kids, and we lost a house, and I wasn't coming home to that family, and they were on welfare, and it was awful. Short party. Sipping on beers at 13, 14, finally getting really drunk at 14, 15. 17, already been to jail, in trouble, carrying a gun. 22, mental institution. Powerless. You don't need any other proof that alcoholism is physiological other than that last 3 to 5 years that you and I spent out there. No one would consciously do that to themselves if they had any choice in the matter at all. There's no party. I mean, we all tell the same story, don't we? We all tell the same story that long before we ever drank, we felt separate from. We didn't feel part of. We couldn't connect. The aliens had dropped us off and we're waiting for the mothership to return. We have cute ways but we all tell the same story. And usually when we're telling that story, somewhere along the line, we'll use a term called alcoholic thinking. As if there is such a thing. I mean, you repeat something often enough and people just pick it up. Like, well, yeah, I have alcoholic thinking, You don't ever hear that term anywhere else than in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like you never hear that we're above average intelligence in an Al-Anon meeting either. Ever. They never talk about us like that, You know what the professional community says about us? The professional community says, and Silkworth said, he wrote a paper on it in 1940-41. They say that we are emotionally immature. And we hear that and we go, no! I have special thinking. I have alcoholic thinking and it's never going away. And you need to consider that when you're dealing with me. I have special thinking. I'm convinced that we're just emotionally immature. I got here at 37 years old, and on a good day I had the emotional development of a 16-year-old, and this kid was not an honor student. He's not the one that's mature beyond his years, that got into Harvard at 12. This 37, and I look grown up, but I'm not. And I have no clue. I don't know that I'm emotionally immature. I don't know that I'm not capable of connecting to other human beings. So I think the whole idea when we felt this disconnect when we were kids and we felt gawky and geeky, I think all kids feel that way at some level. The difference between us and them is that we medicated that feeling and we never grew out of it. And here we are now. We're going to grow up now. And the chances of us doing that and looking good are really slim. Because we're a little late. We're a little late. And so we have a couple of drinks and that feeling goes away. And I think the whole idea behind the drinking, was to have a couple of pops and get out of the house and go to the party and have some fun. Hook up with her or him and have an adventure. I ended up naked in my living room watching religious television, taking notes. I'm having sex menage a uno. There's no one else in the room. You know, we're partying with Billy now. It's getting serious. So next time somebody walks into one of your rooms and says, well, I'm just a party kind of guy, ask him, how many other people were at the party? You know? No, I think by nature, most of us are partiers. That's what makes AA fun. You know, AA's fun. These things are fun. All the people that come to conventions, it's like preaching to the choir. You people love it. You love it. You have a good time with it. You laugh, the humor. I mean, geez. What other organization do you know that you can say foul language and our Heavenly Father in the same sentence? You know, I mean, it's like, and everybody just roars. Yeah, dude, get spiritual, man. Yeah. You know, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. It's fun. Another proof that alcoholism is physiological, because the party stops, doesn't it? It stops, and we hang in there for a long time after the party has stopped. You know, we can't stop. We can't stop. I finally got 15 years after the mental institution. I finally got sober. I got married a second time. I had 2 more children, and I lived in the house with this wife and these 2 kids, and I had no emotional connection to another living human being. And I didn't know that. I can't stand outside myself and have a separate experience and compare it to the one that I'm having and determine that there's something wrong. How would I know that I'm not connected if I've never, ever been connected in the first place? I don't know what connected feels like. You know, that's why the alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. It's the only one I ever knew. When I come to you, I have no comprehension that there's a different way of living and a different way of feeling, because I've never lived that way or felt that way ever in my life. It's not like I'm going to try to recapture something. I've truly, truly been born again. And I don't even know it yet. I was 2 or 3 years into sobriety, and I went to hear this Indian guru speak up in Hollywood. And a friend of mine was connected to this man, really, really neat guy. And after he gave his talk, we were sitting in this back room, just the 3 of us. We were sitting there talking, and I'm talking away, which is my way. And he looks at me and he starts laughing. I go, what are you laughing at? He says, I just love you, alcoholics and drug addicts. And I said, why is that? And he goes, well, the rest of them out there are trying to get awakened. You're just trying to figure out what the hell happened. And he smiled, and he very sincerely, he says, you've got it. You just don't know it. But you've got it. People pay big money for what has happened to us. People take a lot of dope for to try to recreate what has happened to us. It's a remarkable thing. It's a very special thing. It's rare what has happened to us. We've been awakened. And I think the rest of the journey is to take that awakening and turn it into some kind of an awareness where we're actually aware that we're awake. You know? Maybe there's something that we can do with this. Maybe there's a reason why I was awakened. Maybe there's a job for me here. Maybe this is about more than just me bettering my life. And maybe it's going to look completely different from what I think it's going to look like. Because like most of us, I'm here to get the heat off. You know, I don't want to lose my wife and my family. I don't want to go down the drain. I want it to stop. But something happened to me on March the 27th, 1985. Something radical. I'm one of those cases where the obsession was taken away immediately. Some people, it takes a while. My sponsor, it took a while before the obsession. Dr. Bob, 2.5 years, 3 years. It took a while before the obsession was lifted. With me, I just didn't notice. I didn't, because it was just gone. You know, after 35 days in that hospital organization, they let me out. They just let us out, don't they? Like we're okay. Go forth, multiply. You know? And where do we end up when they let us out? Here. It's linoleum floors and metal folding chairs for the rest of our natural lives, you know? Rock and roll. You know, there's no referrals from AA. Did you know that? There's no place you go where you walk in and you say, I'm from AA. They sent me here. That place doesn't exist. This is it. This is truly the last house on the street. We are the counselors. The inmates are running the asylum. Stop and think about it. I've been married 3 times and people ask me for relationship advice. I give it to them. I figure, hell, you can't hurt them. They're in AA, you know? Plus the fact, whatever advice you give them couldn't possibly be worse than what they're planning on doing in the first place. It's not possible. Plus they always come and tell you what they've already done anyway. They rarely come beforehand. This is a true story. A guy came to me and he says, I'm thinking about marrying the nude dancer. What do you think? I looked right at him. I said, probably not a good idea. But if you do, I'll come to the wedding. He married her. It was horrible. He's now married to a school teacher. They've adopted a child. They've been together a long time. True thing. He could not have married the school teacher if he hadn't have married the nude dancer. I see that clear as a bell now. My wife told me, she says, don't tell him not to do it. But I couldn't help myself. So now I'm in AA. What now? You hear a lot of stuff around here. A lot of it's really good. You talked about AA is a dynamic organization. It's evolving and changing. The demographic has changed. Recovery is available at all levels of our society now. You know, Wilson wanted to build hospitals across the country. We have that. Maybe it didn't look like the way we thought it was going to look, but here it is. You look at the young people coming into AA today, you know. I mean, what we do is we complain about them, don't we? What are they doing here? I have a bunch of my old buddies going, we're not a daycare center. There's like this illusion like these kids are coming here because we're so hip. My friend Scott Redmond used to say, Alcoholics Anonymous has offered me a level of lameness that I didn't know was available. It's like it's a new paradigm. And, I think they're coming here because they need help. My men's stag, the Hermosa Beach men's stag, the epicenter of sobriety, the epicenter within the epicenter of sobriety, you know. About 100 guys, and it's a real right-wing kind of a meeting. When did working the steps and reading the book become right-wing? It's another thing. I should stop using that. It's just middle of the road. You know, that's what we talk about there. If you start talking about your girlfriend, we'll just start clapping until you stop. And we're not interested in how your day went. You know, really, not at all. You know, we're talking about recovery here, and we pick a topic and we share on it. And we have a leader that leads. He points at people. If you raise your hand, we'll just ignore you. You'll get a resentment that'll keep you sober for a decade. You know, it's one of those meetings, you know. About 100 guys. And 8, 9, 10 years ago, the young people started showing up. And they were always out in the parking lot. They finally started matriculating in, you know, and staying sober. And they just refused to leave. About 6 or 7 years ago, this kid was taking a cake. He's 15 years old. He was taking a 1-year cake. And he's short. He's like 3 feet tall because he's not done growing yet, you know. And you got to stand up at the head of the room. And it's very intimidating because we are judging you. And we're okay with that. I mean, judgment is cool. It's all right. Because you do it anyway. You know, so he gets up there and he gave the most right-wing death squad AA pitch I have ever heard. And at the end of it, he was standing there and he was yelling and pointing his finger. And he says, if you're sitting out there and you don't have a sponsor and you're not working the steps, may God have mercy on your soul. I went up and asked him to be my sponsor. We were walking around for weeks after that looking at each other going, may God have mercy on your soul. Lightweight, you know. So now there's kids in the room. We've got children in the room. We've got gay people. We've got black people. We've got Mexicans. We've got white trash. We got everything. We got everything. Everything is here. Everybody thinks they're special. Everybody wants to be treated a little bit differently. What do we do with all that? Two things happened to me that I believe are just lucky. I just was lucky with these two things. One is I became intrigued with Alcoholics Anonymous real quickly. Within a week or two, I got intrigued by you. Probably the first meeting I went to, I got intrigued. It was a crazy meeting and a lot of hooting and hollering. It was one of these classic Southern California sacrilegious meetings where people yelling across the room and everybody's counting the steps off and people got blue hair and, you know, I mean, it was just, and I'm thinking, I'm sitting in the back of the room feeling really out of place, like I've always felt all my life, thinking, you know, this is kind of cool. I had no idea it was going to be like this, you know, and then it escalated from there, and I fell in love with the stories. I got intrigued with your stories. You know, I have a friend, we got sober together, and he says that he stayed sober 6 months just on the stories, just coming to listen to the stories, to hear it, you know, to hear his story, essentially. When we get intrigued by the stories, it's because we relate to it, we get it. Dr. Paul said, you know, I mean, if you start laughing at the jokes, that's when you catch alcoholism. You know, if you get the banter, if you get the dialogue, if you get it, you're probably screwed, you know, because they just don't get this stuff down at the Rotary Club, you know. I mean, it's just like, it's not the same deal. The second thing, so I've never lost my enthusiasm for AA. I've never, in 27 years, I have never been bored. I've been pissed off, I've been a lot of things, but you have never, ever bored me. And I'm convinced that if you're sitting in AA, if you're bored, it's because you're boring. You know, I mean, this is better than any reality television show they can make up. You just know there's going to be one someday, you know, where they're going to have this AA meeting and they'll film it. They could come down to the Hermosa Beach Alano Club and just set up their camera and walk away. You know, I mean, it's just a zoo. It's a zoo, you know. I mean, what's not to like? I've always been attracted to bizarre, you know. The second thing that happened is I asked a guy to sponsor me, and I got a guy that wasn't afraid of me. And I don't mean because of my size, but by this time when I showed up in AA, I was like over 300 pounds, and I was just a mess. And there was no big tough guy anymore. None of that. That head was long, long gone. So there was no intimidation factor. What I mean by not being afraid of me is he was not afraid to be alone with me and sit and read the book with me and share his life with me. And a lot of us are afraid of that. You know, a lot of us say things like, well, I do other things. I don't sponsor people. Like what other things? There's no other job in AA. There's nothing else to do. Everything else is an activity. Should everybody sponsor? Absolutely. There's nothing else to do. You know, and you can't make up for that with anything else. You know, the amount of recovery that we get from sponsoring people, how we confront our defects of character and all that happens in that one-on-one interaction. It's an intimate relationship, and we don't know anything about intimacy, and we're afraid of it. That's how we learn intimacy. That's how we grow up emotionally, is by interacting with each other. So this guy brought me right into his house, and we sat there, and each week, you know, he gave me an assignment. He said, read the doctor's opinion, make notes in the margin of what you agree with and don't, and we'll discuss it. And I sat down, and he did not trust me that I'd read it, so he had me sit there and read it to him out loud. Rule number 1, make sure they read the book. And he did that. Now, I thought this is how you were all doing this. I didn't know any different. I didn't know that there were other ways. I didn't know there was AA light. Maybe I would have gone there, And I don't know. I didn't know. And I got lucky with that, because right off the bat, man, fresh off the truck, I'm working the steps. No hesitation. Didn't wait for me to clear up. I think if we get them in that first 6 months before they get a little weller, before they can actually argue with us, we got a good shot at keeping them around. Because I don't know if you've ever sponsored a guy that's been around for several years and then finally he decides it's time to work the steps. You got a fight on your hands sometimes. I won't fight with him anymore, but I used to fight with him. Just come on now, shut up and read that. You ever had a guy want to do the third step, and you get to the third step and he says, you say, "Are you ready to do the third step?" And the guy says, "No." I go, "Why not?" He says, "Well, I have a problem with God." I look right at him. I go, "Me too. Let's pray." A couple of guys said to me, "I don't even believe in God." I look right at him today. I got the best answer in the world. Nobody really does. Let's pray. The argument just dies. It's like, what are you going to say to that? Guy told me he didn't believe in God, but he made me pray with him. Let's move on. Let's keep going. God isn't an issue. None of this stuff is an issue. So this guy got me into it right away. And at 6 months, I had done a 5th step. And by the end of the year, I was making amends, and I started sponsoring people. So the first step says that we're powerless and that our life had become unmanageable. It gives the idea that at one time my life was manageable. I don't remember that time. Evidently, maybe for some other people. But my life's never been manageable. I don't think my life requires management, really. There's that illusion that I need to manage it. But the powerless thing is a huge concept. It's huge. It only takes about 20 years to get it. I think it takes 20 years before it really sinks in. They took it easy on us. They just said that we were powerless over alcohol so that we wouldn't run screaming down the street, But you stop and think of it, powerless. I think I have power. I think I have, evidently, my happiness is dependent upon your behavior, because I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to adjust you so that we can both be a little happier. When I look out in nature, I don't see anything that has any power. Nothing. The lion eats the lamb every time. Every time. And I make judgments. I look at that and I go, that big evil lion shouldn't eat that little lamb. It's not right. It's immoral. It's unjust. It's unfair. I don't think there's any morality in nature. I think stuff just happens. And I look at it and I make judgments. And those judgments are the source of all my suffering. That illusion that I have some power is the source of all the suffering in my life. I think I have some control. I think things should be different than they are, and they continue to stay the same. And I suffer over that. I feel the pain of loss of somebody close to me. Then on top of that, I make the judgment that they should not have left me, that they should not have died, they should not, whatever happened. Now I've taken the normal, natural pain of life, of loss, and I've laid a layer of suffering over the top of it with my judgment that it was incorrect. Power. I have power. The lion keeps eating the lamb, so we make up parables, and we say the day will come, someday in the future, when justice will pervade. Because right now it's awful. So sometime in the future, when it's not awful anymore, the lion will lay down with the lamb. If that day comes, I'll bet you that lamb will be nervous for eternity. It is the nature of the lion to eat the lamb. It's just the way things are. Hope at that point becomes a problem, doesn't it? Hope is not a positive thing. Hope tells me that now is not good. That now shouldn't be the way that it is. And the truth is, all I have is this present moment. There is nothing else. Everything else is an illusion. It's a fantasy. It's a creation in my own mind. Powerless, the depth of the concept. Now, when we're new, the physical allergy to alcoholism is our number one issue. Am I powerless over it? In my case, it was just obvious. I mean, it was... I never had any power. I never crossed a line. I drank alcoholically right from the get, and I just went steadily down the drain. Nothing happened in my life. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. I didn't accomplish anything. You know, there's an old movie back in the 30s called Reefer Madness. You seen it? It's a real cult classic now. It's just, if you get a chance to watch it, it's just hilarious. And in there, essentially what they tell you is that smoking marijuana leads to heroin. Well, you and I know that's not true. It's beer leads to heroin. It starts with the beer, you know. And in the end, for me, all the drugs were gone. I had quit all the drugs. All the 60s cool stuff was gone. There was no more rock and roll. There was me and a gin bottle. I had to get sober to realize the depth of my alcoholism. Don Pritz used to say, people ask me, what's my drug of choice? Well, my drug of choice was heroin. The drug I had no choice over whatsoever was alcohol. That's true for me. I never thought to quit. I never tried to quit. But I quit a lot of other things. A lot of other stuff. You know, that Paisley era that I grew up in. But in the end, there was me and a gin bottle. So at that time, I'm sitting there with this sponsor. All I needed to be clear about was the fact that I was powerless over alcohol. My life being unmanageable, just look at it. Just look at it. If I'm going to stay sober for a long time, which I have now, I'm going to address this powerlessness over and over and over again. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. In AA, at about 8 or 9 years sober, I had some kind of a mental and emotional collapse. What I believe happened is the sheer weight of my personality just crushed me. It just crushed me. And I left my wife and 2 kids and ended up living in a storeroom over my office in El Segundo. I had egg running down the side of my face. I had said some pretty powerful stuff for 10 years in AA. There were a lot of people that were really happy to see me crash and burn. And I don't blame them a bit. You know, I had a lot of amends to make in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was an arrogant know-it-all when I was drinking. I was a better arrogant know-it-all when sobriety. And I would pound my fist on the podium and yell with spit flying out of my mouth, work the steps or die, mother. You know. And I knew I was the light and the way. I was president of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a very lonely position. There was a coup. I was impeached, you know. And there were a few people waiting at the base of the tree to catch me when I fell out of the tree. A few. People that loved me. That's the love in AA. You know, there were a lot of people that just patted me on the head during this period and said, you're going to be okay if you don't kill yourself. You know, it's like, you know, because other people have gone through it. And at 8 or 9 years sober, man, I wrote out an inventory that was just killer. And I hadn't spoken to my sponsor in a long time because when you're president of AA, you really don't need to talk to anybody. I went to him, I wrote some stuff down on a piece of paper, and he acknowledged. He goes, "Whoa, it must be bad. You wrote something down." Whoa. And I looked at him and I said, "I need help. There's something really wrong, and I need help. Please help me." And I meant it. I was in more emotional pain than I'd ever been in my life. And he looked at me and he said, "Go find God." And I went, "Please, I don't need mindless platitudes. I need some real practical help. Don't treat me like some dumbass newcomer." And we were sitting down, and he rarely yelled at me, but he got up and he walked over and he looked down at me and he yelled in my face. He got right up in my face. He goes, "There is nothing else. You talk a good game. Now go do it." And I almost hit him. I was so enraged, I don't think I've ever heard truer words in my life than what he said to me. And that is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to work on Billy's some more. I wanted to go deep down inside and find the root cause of my neurotic problems, when I was in the recovery place, they made me wear a sign around my neck. I had to make the sign. We made it in crafts. There's a little rectangular piece of cardboard with a string that went through it, and it said on there, "I am not a counselor." Because evidently there was some confusion about that. They said something about me being arrogant or something, I don't know. I had to start over. I don't have the power. I think I have the power. It's part of the human condition to believe that we have power. That we're in charge. If we don't do something, it's not going to happen. We don't have the concept that the universe by its very nature is a giving place and it's supplying us with absolutely everything we need. That our problem is that we just don't like what's being supplied. It should be something different than it is. And we try to make stuff happen. I try to make things happen. I used to have a clipboard that had a list of the good people's name on one side and the bad people on the other side. I would go up and ask people publicly in front of other people. I would go up and say, "Hey, you want to volunteer down at the central office?" And a guy would say to me, "No, I don't do that." I would come back every week and ask him, and I'd say it louder and louder and louder in order to shame him. Now, who the hell do you think you are? What are you in here in AA sucking off the tit and not doing a goddamn thing? I used to say that to people. And most of the time I'm too big to hit. Not all the time, though. But that's how I was. That's how I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wanted a following. I wanted devotees. I wanted my own church. It's like kind of. I wouldn't use that term, but I was. That's my normal nature. The last thing I ever wanted to do was just sit in the room with the rest of you like a bunch of sheep. You know how some speakers will say, "I don't like to be the speaker at the meeting because I'm the only one looking in the opposite direction and I'm not part of the group." I love that. I eat that up. That's special. Now I'm special. I told my sponsor during this period when everything was falling apart, I said, "I think I should stop speaking at meetings. There's too much ego in it." He looked right at me and he said, "You don't get to pick and choose what you will and won't do. It's not up to you. But I suggest to you the next time you speak in front of a group of people, why don't you try telling the truth?" I looked at him confused. Really, genuinely confused. "What do you mean? I'm not lying to people." And he goes, "Quit doing theater. Talk about what's really going on in your life. They'll understand. And you understand. You get it. So the next time I spoke at a meeting, I started talking about ego. People loved it. They all nod their head. Yeah, we get it. You're as screwed up as me. I think I'm different. I think I'm special. I think I'm powerful. And the literal truth is I have no power at all. Therein lies all my suffering. This belief that I have power. Wilson says, selfishness and self-centeredness was the root of our problems. I don't think he was kidding. He says, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. I think that's my favorite line in the book, and I think that is literally true. And that has been my course. That has been my course. When I get on my knees and ask for help, I shouldn't send it away when it shows up and it's going to look a lot like you. Somebody sent me a quote today on email. He said, we will love you until you can learn to love others. Isn't that wonderful? The second step says that I need some kind of power. If I don't have the power, I need to align myself with whatever is driving the universe. Whatever it is that saved my life. Whatever that inserted itself into my life. Whatever engine, whatever power, whatever force that it might be. Maybe I should attempt to align myself with that. Certainly to be restored to enough sanity not to drink and use, but also enough sanity to be able to see the powerlessness. To be able to see it, to get a glimpse of it. This is the beginning of acceptance. This is where acceptance comes in, the beginning of it. There's more later. One of the beauties of this conference is we get to talk about this process that we also dearly love. And these steps are specifically designed, as we read at the beginning, to bring about this spiritual awakening, to put us in touch with whatever this power is. I love quotes. I send out daily quotes. I have a huge email list, and I gather these things up. I get them from people. Alan Watts said one of the most powerful things I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it clarified some stuff for me a couple of years ago that it was a stunning revelation, just for me. He said, faith is not knowing and having that be okay. I always figured what faith was is that I have a belief mechanism that I have faith is true. And he's saying something much deeper than that. It's a very mystical concept. Faith is not knowing, having no belief mechanism whatsoever. The faith that everything is absolutely as it should be all the time. It could not possibly be any different than it is because here it is. Boy, that's hard for us, isn't it? It's hard for me. It doesn't come natural to me. One of the things that's happened for me at 20 years sober, after this collapse that occurred, I think I'm okay here. After this collapse that happened, I met my current wife. We've been together now 18 years. I have a relationship that I never thought was possible. You know what happens to us when we deeply and profoundly fall in love? We get frightened. What if something takes that away from me? I will die. I've been around people in AA that have lost that great love. They did not die. I've held them in my arms, as many of us have. One of the great things we do for each other around here is that we don't have to give advice. We don't have to tell people. When people are broken, we know there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't need to be repaired. We can just hold them and love them. But we get frightened when that starts opening up our heart. I learned how to love through interaction with you. My motivation to have devotees and followers and all that stuff, it's embarrassing. What it has morphed into is I have truly, literally fallen in love with you. At 64 years old and 27 years sober, at this point in my life, I am absolutely bored to tears with myself. It's just, I find me very embarrassing. But you, on the other hand, are a never-ending font of weirdness. It's like, I am just forever intrigued by you and what you bring to the table and how you open my heart. At 20 years sober, I went through interferon twice to get rid of the hep C. I'm on a liver transplant list now. I've got really bad cirrhosis. I mean, the damage has just gone, it went too far. Shock and awe. I'm in AA and I have a bad liver. Who do you blame for that? And I went through this, and I was stuck in my house, and I'm not a depressed guy. I'm not a suicide guy. I'm a homicide guy. I much prefer another Scott Redmond. I much prefer your death over mine, you know, and I miss him every day. But I was as depressed as I can get. I was stuck in the house. I couldn't get out. And my friend Christophe, who's French, so he's an asshole, came over to my house, and he handed me The Power of Now. And he said, read this. And I said, yeah, I'll read it. He goes, God damn it. He says, read it. Just read it. So I read it. And totally tells a story about waking up in the middle of the night with just one more anxiety attack in the middle of the night. And he walks out into his living room and he says to himself, I can't live with myself any longer. And the very next thought is, well, then there must be two of me. If I can't live with myself, there must be two of me. And the very next thought is, I wonder which one is real. Great question. That was his enlightenment. That was his moment of awakening. And I read that, and I got that. I got it. And I've read stuff like that before. I'm a great study. I read books and spiritual stuff so I can repeat it back and sound real spiritual. And most of the time I'm not conscious of this. This is all hindsight. This is looking back, you know, at the track record of Bill C. But none of it really ever got internalized. It never really went inside to where it affected any kind of real spiritual change in me. This whole thing of finding a power greater than myself has been a very long process, and it continues. It continues. But at that point in time, I read that book, and it changed my life. The book, I don't know if it was the book. The Student was ready. People have been talking about this since the dawn of time. This is not new information. This is very old, ancient stuff, very mystical, ancient stuff. And I started meditating with some intent. I started meditating to get some help for my condition. And not the physical condition, not the liver, not that. My heart, how I perceive the world, this psychic change that we talk about incessantly. How I look at the world, how I see it. Is it a dark place? At that point in my life, it was a very dark place. And I was trying to will myself out of it. You know, I was going and I was trying to keep moving like we do. I have pretty good discipline and I can just get off my ass and go to the meeting and I can do stuff, but it wasn't helping. I reached a point where I needed more than just showing up. Bring the body and then the mind will follow. It wasn't working anymore. Doing fist steps with guys, and it wasn't working anymore. It stopped working. And I started meditating, and I had the experience of being able to watch my thoughts. I came to understand through an experience that I am not my thinking mind. That's my connection with this power. That's my connection. That's it, as tenuous as it might be. Also, the faith that everything is perfect, everything is fine, it couldn't possibly be any different than it is. I get that. I get that in a non-intellectual knowing sense. I feel it in my breast. I sat out on the beach today. I had an alone day today, which is rare for me. You know, I'm rarely alone. I don't like to be alone, to be honest with you. I love having people around me. But I sat on that beach today and closed my eyes and just breathed and listened to the children play on the beach and stuff. And I'm connected. I'm connected. Is there a belief mechanism behind that? No. I don't need one. I can feel it. Alcoholics Anonymous is an experience. It's not an intellectual understanding. Does intellectual understanding come? Yes. Yes, it comes. I can stand up here and I can verbalize what's going on. Does it come close to touching what's going on inside me? Not real well. doesn't lend itself to words very well. But you get it. You get it. Last year, I was in the hospital 3 different times. My liver finally failed on me. I got rid of the Hep C, and my liver failed on me. 2 years ago, I ended up in the hospital on Christmas Day with pneumonia. And this doctor, very cool guy, young guy, didn't know me. He's sitting beside the side of the bed, and I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew I was coughing up blood. Things were not looking well, and I was frightened. And he sat down beside me, and he was asking me questions, and he said, "Do you drink?" And I said, "No, man, I haven't drank for almost 26 years." And he goes, "Oh." And I said, "It's kind of pathetic, isn't it?" And he looked at me, he goes, "No, it's just sad." And he says, "Are you in pain?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you like some morphine?" I went, "Yes." He said, "You want 4 milligrams or 8?" And I said, "Why would you mention 4? You know, there's nothing like general anesthetic to kind of get you through the day, you know." And that started a cycle where I ended up in the hospital. I had a couple of surgeries, and Thomas Merton said, "I have no control. I have no power. I have no control over my own body." When you're laying in a hospital bed and you don't want to be there, powerless comes home to roost. There you are. So are you going to make the nurses pay for your fear? Is that what you're going to do, Bill? Because that's my MO. I'm the frightened little boy. I'm here to report to you this experience this last year. I think that frightened little boy is about gone. Thank God. I didn't like that kid. And nobody else around him liked him either much. Because he's frightened. He's a scared little boy. And he doesn't know how to reach out. And you start showing up at the hospital. The nurse comes in and goes, "Who are all these people?" And I said to her, "What do you think they are? What do you think?" And she goes, "Well, at first I thought it was your kids, but you couldn't have that many." And I said, "What's AA?" And she goes, "Oh, okay." Because they've seen it before, but it just didn't register. But you come in there, and the alcoholics show up, and they're just checking their good thing off the list. You know, it's like, you know, and the Al-Anons will come and actually help you. You know, they bring food and stuff. You know, it's like, and when my mother was dying, especially, they were just a blessing. I nursed my mother until she died. But this last year, that meditation and that believing that everything's as it should be, putting myself in your hands, letting people care for me, letting people love me. I used to hear that when you would talk about that when I was new, and I just would poo-poo it. Like, wait, now it's real to me. It isn't that easy for me to let you really love me. You know, my friend John that I've sponsored for a long time, he's just one of the closest people in my life. Him and this guy, Brooks, he came and slept in the hospital room with me for 2 nights. I heard 2 nurses stand out in the hallway, and the one nurse says to the other in the middle of the night, she goes, "Who's that guy in there with him?" And the other nurse says, "I think that's his boyfriend." True story. And I went, "Whoa, dude." And so the other nurse goes, "Oh, okay." And they just walked on, you know. So John wakes up in the morning, and I said, "There's 2 things I really love about you." And he goes, "What's that?" And I go, "You're younger than me, and you're really good looking." Thank God, because you're my gay lover, man. He goes, "What?" And we just roared. And then tried to tell them about our wives and kids, but they don't believe that. It came out later, You just have to live with it, Don't we laugh in the face of death? We laugh in the face of death. You know what we can do when we walk into a hospital room when somebody's really sick is we can make them laugh. Maybe their family members can't do it, but we can do that. We can bring humor into a dark room. We can light up the room. You lit up the room for me. You lit up the room. So this second step about being restored to sanity, have I been restored to sanity? I think so. I think so. Am I perfect? No, of course not. But what's sanity? When I screw up, I can say I'm sorry. All of my problems reside in the third dimension, in the realm of the material. All the solution to all of them is in the fourth dimension, in the realm of the spirit. It's taken me a long time to be able to see that. And I'll tell you something. The most important concept in the 12 steps for me today is this whole idea of powerlessness. Certainly when I'm new, not drinking, not using, critical. And I've got to understand that and really know what my problem is. And as the years have gone by, if I'm going to be peaceful and quiet in this sobriety, the powerlessness takes on a larger and larger and larger meaning. And it encompasses everything. I am not of the school that once I get sober, I am re-empowered. It just simply hasn't been my experience. I understand when people talk about that. My personal experience, it just hasn't been that way. I've become more and more powerless. And this is a good thing, because even if I think I have power, I don't have any, and that's where all my suffering lies. I'll leave you with one thought. People say, you got to give it away to keep it. No. You've got to give it away to even get it. If you're not giving it away, you don't have it. Thank you very much.